A minor impact. A soft crunch of metal at just 15 miles per hour. Then, the stark quiet inside a Heidelberg hospital room. A pen stroke on a document. Shifting a celebrated name and vast wealth. Physicians believed General Patton would leave that Heidelberg facility in under 3 months. Official Army inquiries concluded the 1945 vehicle collision was an ordinary mishap, devoid of any wider significance. His adversaries within SHAEF saw his demise as a convenient escape from a difficult post-war military tribunal. Each assessment proved incorrect. His passing accomplished more than simply concluding a military career. It granted 3 powerful figures the chance to dictate the World War II story, systematically diminishing the general's place for 3 decades. On December 21, 1945, the final chapter closed. General George S. Patton succumbed to a pulmonary embolism at 5:50 p.m., a dozen days following his car crash near Mannheim. He was 60 years old. Europe's most audacious, most debated, and most impactful combat leader had vanished. A minor impact. No grand final engagement marked his end. Only a common mishap. Then medical issues while confined to a hospital cot. An immediate void opened. Patton consistently challenged Allied leadership during the conflict. A genius, yet defiant. Highly productive, but politically volatile. His commanders had invested 3 years attempting to rein him in. Now, with his death, that control became absolute. 3 key figures had spent the war years overseeing Patton. Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe. Bernard Montgomery, the British Field Marshal and Patton's enduring adversary. And Omar Bradley, once Patton's subordinate, now his commander. These 3 men frequently engaged Patton in professional disputes, personal clashes, and strategic battles. Their disagreements spanned battlefield methods, individual temperament, and the boundaries of authority. Patton held the conviction that he was the premier combat leader among the Allied armies. His adversaries, however, saw him as impulsive, unruly, and a political liability. His death removed the burden of his constant oversight. They gained the power to characterize him, sculpt his historical standing, and dictate the war's memory. This strategic opening was grasped instantly. Eisenhower initiated his political ascent just a few months after Patton's passing. He commanded Allied forces, masterminded D-Day, and orchestrated coalition strategy across continents. His battlefield achievements were significant, but his political acumen proved even greater. Eisenhower recognized that his future lay in public office. He started crafting the balanced, sensible persona that would propel him to the nation's highest office. Patton's absence facilitated this public perception. During Patton's life, Eisenhower frequently defended him or considered his dismissal. The notorious slapping incidents, the rogue Hammelburg raid, the unending public pronouncements that caused diplomatic friction. Eisenhower found himself compelled to act as Patton's overseer. Without Patton, Eisenhower could present himself as the composed, strategic commander, securing victory through careful planning and alliance building, not just aggressive battlefield maneuvers. His political trajectory gained momentum throughout the late 1940s. He held the position of Army Chief of Staff between 1945 and 1948. From 1948 to 1950, he led Columbia University. Then, from 1950 to 1952, he became NATO's Supreme Commander. Every appointment enhanced his public standing and trustworthiness. By 1952, he sought the presidency of the United States. Securing the Republican nomination, his campaign highlighted his wartime command and centrist political views. A decisive victory brought him 2 terms in office. He emerged as a highly regarded 20th-century president. The commander who once considered dismissing Patton now held the most significant power in the Western Hemisphere. Eisenhower's time in office molded the Cold War in directions Patton would have resisted. He established the military-industrial complex, a system the pure warrior Patton would likely have challenged. Eisenhower prioritized nuclear deterrence and large-scale reprisal. Patton favored traditional ground forces and bold offensive maneuvers. Eisenhower sought diplomatic resolutions and a strategy of containment. Patton urged direct conflict with the Soviet Union, while American troops remained deployed across Europe. Their fundamental strategic philosophies were irreconcilable. Patton's passing silenced the loudest advocate for aggressive anti-Soviet military action in the early post-war era. Eisenhower's measured strategy then became the de facto American stance. Field Marshal Montgomery dedicated his post-war years to crafting his own legend. Through published memoirs and public engagements, Bernard Law Montgomery, 1st Viscount Montgomery of Alamein, sat in the House of Lords and held the Deputy Supreme Commander role at NATO from 1951 to 1958. His personal accounts appeared in print during 1958. The volume quickly became a British bestseller, solidifying Montgomery's interpretation of the conflict for his countrymen. It depicted Montgomery as the meticulous, prudent leader, whose strategic foresight and restraint secured crucial victories. Patton, by contrast, emerged as a flamboyant, impulsive subordinate, his aggressive methods demanding continuous oversight from composed commanders such as Montgomery. This battle for historical memory was profoundly unbalanced. The deceased general offered no rebuttal. His personal journals and correspondence remained, but under family control. Patton's collected writings would not see publication until 1963. For half a decade, Montgomery's narrative had already circulated, shaping public perception of the North Africa, Sicily, and Northwest Europe campaigns. Montgomery's portrayal of Patton as gifted yet volatile solidified into the prevailing account. Montgomery's meticulously crafted memoir downplayed his own missteps, notably Market Garden, while crediting Patton's triumphs to mere chance or to Montgomery's own strategic groundwork that enabled those advances. Omar Bradley's ascent proved the most remarkable. Bradley had served under Patton in both North Africa and Sicily. Yet, by the European campaign's conclusion, Bradley led the 12th Army Group, with Patton's 3rd Army reporting to him. Following the conflict, Bradley reached unparalleled levels of influence. He attained 4-star rank, directed Veterans Affairs, served as Army Chief of Staff, and chaired the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 1949 to 1953. He was the inaugural officer to occupy that role. His 5-star insignia arrived in 1950. Bradley served as Chief Military Counsel to Presidents Truman and Eisenhower through the Cold War's nascent years. He influenced American defense policy for the Korean conflict and the nascent nuclear age. His own memoir, A Soldier's Story, appeared in 1951. The volume depicted Patton as a skilled yet challenging subordinate, demanding perpetual oversight. Bradley detailed repeatedly curbing Patton's aggressive impulses and realigning his operations when they risked exceeding logistical support. He also recounted defending Patton to Eisenhower and Marshall when the general's public remarks sparked political difficulties. The implication was unambiguous. Patton's effectiveness stemmed from proper management by commanders like Bradley. Absent such oversight, Patton would have posed a threat to his own troops. This depiction aimed to enhance Bradley's image as the soldier's general, capable of handling challenging subordinates like Patton, while preserving strategic clarity. A deliberate dismantling of Patton's tactical principles commenced in the late 1940s. Third Army's focus on rapid movement, offensive action, and exploitation maneuvers gave way to more measured methodologies. The revised doctrine stressed overwhelming firepower, robust logistics, and synchronized efforts. Patton's command style, marked by forward posts and direct leadership on the battlefield, was disfavored. Replaced by centralized oversight, the military force of the 1950s became slower, more bureaucratic, and more hesitant than the army Patton had driven through France. These shifts were framed as wartime lessons, yet their true impact was to eradicate Patton's imprint on American military ethos. In grand, oak-paneled chambers, rivals meticulously crafted historical accounts with gilded pens, shaping the war's narrative for future generations. While, in Massachusetts, a widow quietly consigned letters to a fireplace, safeguarding fragments of a disputed legacy. A plain white cross marks a field in Luxembourg, indistinguishable among thousands of similar memorials. He was the sole general who opted for burial alongside his troops, foregoing a more prominent resting place. Publishing houses continued to issue countless copies of memoirs, consistently framing Patton as a subordinate figure, useful, perilous, and needing constant oversight. Their collective endeavor was singular to seize control of the narrative, define the conflict, and ensure their interpretation became the accepted history. The fundamental issue was Patton's inability to speak for himself. Each memoir from his adversaries remained unchallenged. Every description of his choices stood unrefuted. Every critique of his methods went unaddressed. Patton's own papers eventually offered first-hand evidence that disputed some of these assertions. Yet, by their 1963 publication date, the rival accounts had been firmly entrenched for more than 10 years. Later historians examining the war faced the task of reconciling both the rivals' memoirs and Patton's documents. This yielded a richer understanding, but the initial upper hand belonged solely to those who outlived him and published earliest. Their ultimate positions in history underscored the magnitude of the rivals' triumph. Eisenhower completed 2 presidential terms, passing away in 1969 at 78, after influencing American Cold War strategy for 20 years. Montgomery gained a viscountcy, authored numerous volumes, and granted innumerable interviews. He died in 1976 at 88, having secured his place as Britain's most celebrated World War commander. Bradley rose to be the inaugural chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the final living 5-star general. He passed in 1981 at 88. His impact on American military doctrine spanning from the World War era through Vietnam. Each of them survived Patton by many decades. All 3 attained levels of power and influence unknown to Patton. They leveraged these roles to dictate the war's historical memory. The stark difference in their final resting places held deep symbolism. Patton rests in the American Cemetery in Luxembourg, within a general officer section, yet surrounded by Third Army soldiers, beneath a simple white cross, identical to all others. This specific location was Patton's pre-mortem directive. He desired to lie among his troops. Eisenhower's tomb lies within his presidential library in Abilene, Kansas, a vast memorial and presidential museum. It stands as a testament to his career and enduring legacy. Montgomery found his final rest at Holy Cross Church in Binstead, England, honored with military ceremony and national acclaim. Bradley's grave is in Arlington National Cemetery. Section 1. Amidst presidents and Supreme Court justices. These physical sites mirrored the divergent trajectories their careers followed once the war concluded. What became of Patton's adversaries after his passing? They amassed influence that reshaped the entire 20th century. Eisenhower ascended to the presidency, molding the Cold War's course. Montgomery was elevated to a British peerage and served as a NATO military consultant. Bradley became the initial chairman of the Joint Chiefs, maintaining sway across several presidential terms. Each published memoirs portraying Patton as brilliant yet erratic, reckless yet capable, always needing guidance from more composed leaders. This portrayal remained largely undisputed for years, as Patton was deceased and unable to reply. These rivals authored the history of World War II, casting themselves as the strategic architects of victory, adept at handling challenging subordinates like Patton. The battle for legacy was ultimately won by longevity. The longest-lived individual dictated the historical account. Patton's death in 1945 occurred before the European campaign's complete narrative could be compiled from diverse viewpoints. His adversaries lived for decades, utilizing that extended period to solidify their accounts as definitive. When historians finally gained access to ample primary evidence to assess conflicting claims, the public's understanding was already firm. Eisenhower, the master strategist; Montgomery, the meticulous professional; Bradley, the general for his soldiers; Patton, the aggressive subordinate, needing oversight. This established framework shaped historical comprehension for future generations. The paradox was that Patton's battlefield record surpassed that of any of his adversaries. Third Army's push through France represented the swiftest, sustained armored offensive of the entire European campaign. The Bastogne relief operation showcased extraordinary operational skill, executed with remarkable speed and accuracy. The Bavarian thrust in the war's closing weeks exemplified the aggressive exploitation tactics Patton had mastered. His rivals might label him reckless, but they could not obliterate his achievements. The inherent conflict between Patton's combat prowess and his rivals' administrative triumphs shaped the historical discourse surrounding his legacy. Patton secured the victories, but his opponents claimed the historical narrative. They lived long enough to author the volumes "He Perished Prematurely," unable to prevent their efforts. The three individuals who sought to control him during wartime dedicated the piece to characterizing him. They presented themselves as victory's masterminds, while Patton became a valuable yet volatile instrument, demanding cautious management. This depiction served their agendas, boosted their standing, and validated their power. Yet it remained partial. Patton's personal writings, when finally released, revealed an alternate account. It spoke of fundamental strategic clashes over wartime conduct, of professional envy and bureaucratic maneuvering, of leaders prioritizing prudence over boldness, and centralized authority over individual initiative. A complete understanding demanded both viewpoints: the rivals' memoirs and Patton's documents, the official histories and the dissenting opinions, the initial victors who wrote first, and the voices that later surfaced to enrich the narrative. The final tally revealed 3 men who outlived their adversary by many decades. Eisenhower by 24 years, Montgomery by 31 years, and Bradley by 36 years. They leveraged this extended lifespan to forge legacies reaching far beyond their military service. They ascended to presidencies, peerages, and chairmanships. They influenced the Cold War, NATO's formation, and American defense policy. They authored books, delivered speeches, and impacted successive generations of military officers and political figures. Patton remained fixed in 1945, a battlefield commander who perished before the peace arrived. His historical impact was restricted to military engagements. Their influence, however, reached into the political and strategic spheres that shaped the post-war global order. Survival marked the critical distinction. They endured. He fell. This solitary truth decided who would command the historical account, and who would become merely a figure in another's tale.